Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on financial management and control beyond Ministries of Finance, which is part 2 of our webinar series. I would like to thank the speakers to join us today and also all of you that took time to listen to a webinar on this topic. So this webinar is part of FMC Webinar Series that we designed to support countries' implementation of FMC reforms, show how FMC is interconnected with budgetary and public sector administration reforms, and how it can also support those reforms, and also to show how implications of reform is much wider and does not take into account only Ministries of Finance, but also ministries and other service deliveries. So implications go much beyond Ministries of Finance. And with this in mind, we will today focus on the management side of FMC. This webinar is hosted on Online Learning Campus and is also part of a program. In this program, you can see a tentative list of all webinars that will be also delivered by the end of 2017. So we also welcome you to browse our events for future webinars. I would just like to mention some of the technicalities. Kindly ask you to mute yourself. If you have any technical issues, please mail or use a chat function to contact our host, who will sort these issues with you. The webinar is recorded, so it will be also available online on our website. So you will be able to go back and listen to parts of it. We kindly ask you to use the chat option to ask questions. These options you can see in a gray area right below participants, as it is showed on the screen. When you write a message, please send it to everyone so that everyone can see a question. And also when you will be today asking a question, because we have many speakers, please indicate to whom you ask this question. Able to the webinar presentations, but we will answer this question after presentations. We have foreseen to have about 20 minutes for this session. So shortly about the agenda for today. After for a short introduction that will be given by me, Kaja Jurtela, program facilitator in auditing area, and Nihat Nakash, who is a senior program advisor for accounting and auditing area at the CEF. We invite Mr. Noel Hepworth, who is independent public policy professional and also CEF fellow, to speak about the management side of FMC. So to set the ground for cases that we'll have then after him. So after about 30 minutes of presentation on the theoretical side, we will then invite Croatian colleagues. Firstly, Mr. Davor Kozina, who is the head of methodology and standard service at the CHU Ministry of Finance of Croatia, speak about how MOF, Ministry of Finance, supports the improved management. And later on, last not least, we will invite colleagues from Zagreb County, Zagrebačka Županija, to present examples. So how works in practice. This practical example will be presented by 3 practitioners. So from Ivica Bošnjak, head of finance department, is Mrs. Zvezdana Kvestic, as head of internal audit unit at Zagreb County, and Mr. Vjeran Stublin, who's the head of education, culture, and sport. So from all these actors, we will hear how FMC changed in about last 5 years in practice. So we believe that this will be very much important for this practice. Will be very much important also for other participants who are and countries who are foreseeing reforms in this area. And as already mentioned, we will then have about 20 minutes for questions and answers. Questions you're welcome to pose anytime, and we will answer these questions at the end of this webinar. Now, my colleague Nihat Nakash to present this webinar objectives. So he will present how this second webinar fits in a wider frame of our webinar series, and what are also objectives of this webinar.
Skaya, and welcome to everybody. Greetings from my side here at the CEF. Very happy to welcome you to the second part of our FMC webinar on implementation beyond Ministries of Finance. I will just walk through the series of objectives very briefly. So in the overall webinar, we wanted to promote the understanding of the context and importance of public internal control and financial management and control reforms for good governance and accountability. And this was largely covered in our series. Next, we also wanted to explain the concepts and frameworks that provide the theoretical underpinnings for these reforms, where we discussed the COSO framework, the IPPF standards, all those integral elements that need to be in place and that set the stage for practical implementation. In this particular webinar, in part 2, we would like to further explore and distinguish ownership over harmonization of public internal controls between the Ministries of Finance and line ministries. And this was the reasoning behind inviting such varied speakers from the MO Central Harmonization Unit to management in line ministries in charge of service delivery. Second objective that we will be addressing today is to explain the management side of financial management and control, meaning to explain the additional responsibilities which these reforms impose on managers and how it is reflected on their daily work. Also today we hope to clarify some of the numerous benefits of successful implementation of FMC reforms, and in the webinar objectives, we will be looking at links between public administration, public financial management, and public internal controls reforms, hoping ultimately to help those who are listening inform their policy and action plan formulation. With to first part in our webinar FMC series, we've explored the strategic perspectives of these reforms, why they matter for good governance and accountability. We highlighted the linkages between these reforms and other broader PFM reforms, and we explained who are the new institutional actors, what are the new roles and responsibilities assigned. Our colleague from the Ministry of Finance also spoke about the Dutch model and how it evolved as a point of reference for hiring countries aspiring for EU membership. Implemented, and in particular, I would like to highlight his reflections on focus being placed on the delegated power and authority over objectives and resources, which creates the foundations for managerial accountability as cornerstone of FMC. And another very important highlight from his presentation was that the accountability extends well beyond compliance to include both efficiency and effectiveness, not only limited to senior management, but also on the operational level. And finally, in our first webinar, as one of the key speakers, we had our colleague Noel Hepworth, who is also with us today. At that stage, Noel was explaining the importance of FMC in the context of civil service reforms, with the focus on changing the interest of management from inputs to outputs, greater discipline in the management process, and basically separating or distinguishing between policy and strategy and operational management in the institutions. All of these should create the preconditions to actually achieve efficiency and effectiveness and improve the accountability both internally and externally. With this, I will just briefly mention in 4 bullet points what are the issues that we will be discussing in part 2 of the webinar series. So we will be talking about the management side of FMC, who are the managers and are the present management structures compatible with FMC requirements, what their responsibilities, and again, separation of policy development and strategic planning from day-to-day operational management. And finally, we will discuss on the implications of introducing FMC to budgetary and accounting system. Again, many, and I hope you are looking forward to the presentations as much as I do. Enjoy.
Thank you, Nihat. We will give word to Mr. Noel Hepworth, associate at the ground, about management side of FMC. Who are the managers? How drive FMC reforms, so benefits of these reforms are met. You're already presenter, and you can have a presentation which we already see.
And I also say thank you to those who are participating in this, and a particular thank you to Julie from Georgia and Tomislav from Croatia. We have spent many times together in the past, and probably in the future as far as Julie is concerned. Well, first to continue what I was talking about in the first webinar, but I need to go over a number of points. And the first point I need to discuss, what exactly is FMC? We talk about it in general terms, but the main point I want to get across is that it is management reform. It's not just a budgetary and financial control reform, it's a management reform. And reform, it should be addressed to the manager. The manager's responsibility is to achieve objectives, and to achieve those objectives efficiently and effectively within the budget and the law, as well as to standard and to time. These are the responsibilities of the manager. To do that, the manager has to decide what information he requires or she requires. And that information will be both performance information and financial information. The manager will have to think about the risks which could stop the objectives being achieved, and will also be responsible for all aspects of control. So control is responsibility of the manager, not anybody else, but the manager. 2 slides, I set out the first actions needed on introducing FMC. We have to decide who the top and senior managers are. And usually it's pretty easy because it's very often the minister and deputy ministers. Usually no problems there. The problems start to emerge after that because following the establishment of who top and senior managers are, we have to think about management structures that should underpin those top and senior managers. And it can be very difficult, and it doesn't always occur because it's not seen as necessary, particularly by some ministers and deputy ministers. And then subordinate managers should be appointed. And this is often very difficult, as subordinate managers will be civil servants. They want managerial responsibility, And in fact, policies may not want to give delegated powers to civil servants. Some sorts of structures, though, and supported managers, the responsibilities of the different levels of management should be defined. And what I summarize here, and it's a theme that continues throughout this presentation, is that top and senior managers should be responsible for policy and strategy. It's important to distinguish between policy and strategy and operational management. So top and senior managers should be responsible for policy and strategy. Operational managers should be responsible for the day-to-day running of the organization. Now, it is difficult if, in fact, there isn't this distinction between policy and strategy and operational management. So, to get this distinction clear is very important. And objectives are needed by everybody. They should have this characteristic of SMART. You're probably all familiar with the acronym SMART. And objectives should be defined by the top and senior management for all managerial levels. And that's difficult if we have got that distinction between policy and strategy and operational management. Because operational management is all at the very highest levels, setting objectives for themselves and being accountable to themselves, and it doesn't work. Relating to this particular issue is that it should be the delegation of authority to achieve objectives should be delegated to the relevant level of management, and that's essential if we're dividing between strategy and operational management. It has to be real delegation, genuine delegation. That means delegation not just of administrative matters but operational matters. May mean changes to budgeting and accounting systems, and I'll refer to that at the end of this presentation. Okay, if you have delegation, you must have accountability. So accountability arrangements must be in place as well. Just looking at illustration, though, and FMC, we're familiar with this first point, that public administration is about planning, organising, directing, coordinating and controlling government operations. The modern trend in governments is make public administration more professional. This is why financial management and control has been developed, and why it is so important. It's part of the process of making public management more professional. And this means to be much greater emphasis on setting and achieving objectives, this outputs, and use available resources efficiently and effectively. So the modern style of public administration is to focus much more on what we're achieving for the money that we're putting in, as opposed to controlling in detail the way in which the money is put into an organisation. The traditional public administration style is, as I said, very different. Administration is, summarising it, control-based. The goals are aimed to make sure that the proper procedures are followed and is focused on inputs. The word proper is a term which doesn't really have a lot of meaning, because it's proper is defined as the beholder of proper sees it. But it's traditional controls. So traditional administration is based on traditional controls and focused on inputs. Management is performance-based. If you achieve an objective, the manager needs discretion. So with management, a lot more discretion is required. The manager needs to make decisions. He may need to make changes in order to achieve his objectives. And it could say that to manage is not to control. There isn't the same degree of detailed control if you're trying to manage something. Hence, the FMC emphasis on delegation and accountability. So those who designed FMC recognized that the manager needs discretion. He needs this, therefore he needs the authority to pursue the objectives, but accountable for what he or she is doing and achieving. On the slide, I set out in reform the management responsibilities in a traditional public administration. Minister current services within legal controls and any other forms of controls. Budgetary constraints, so there's controls over budgetary inputs, how much you can spend on staff, how much you may be allocated certain information about how much you can spend on particular types of supplies and services, products of one sort or another. You've got to ensure that financial and procurement regulations are adhered to. Ensure that all the appropriate administrative decisions are made, and often the manager will be making all those administrative decisions, especially if he's a deputy minister or a minister. These often extend to things like signing every invoice or signing leave chits or signing authority to modify somebody's job description. And a couple of those, very often there are penalty arrangements, and a civil servant may be penalised for not adhering to these traditional procedures. But if you use FMC, those responsibilities are extended very considerably indeed. They must be involved in the budget preparation process. He needs to be involved in a way which isn't normally approved of. So he would be involved in thinking about and the different types of input. How many staff do I need? How much do I need to spend on hiring in people? How much do I need to spend on training? How much do I need to spend on various other activities? So not necessarily just based on, well, I spent this much last year, therefore I'll spend that much this year. So it's involved in the budget preparation process with the FMC is about much more than just budgeting for inputs. But you have to find a way of achieving an objective. So you must plan to deliver the objective. What do we do? How are we going to do it? What are the pros and cons of different courses of action? So a plan becomes very, very important. And with public organisations which are very large, you can't do it all yourself, even if you've got some delegation from ministers and deputy ministers to senior civil servants. There has to be a management structure capable of delivering a lot of detail. Even the storekeeper, in a sense, a manager, and his needs or her needs should be properly reflected in the process. So the subordinate management structure should be designed to deliver the objectives, to tell the standard within budget efficiently and effectively. They're words that we all use, but often don't put a lot of meaning to them. Should also be responsible for establishing or reviewing the control environment to make sure it's capable of delivering all the objectives that have been set for the manager. In this, he had on what level of delegation shall I give to subordinate managers? And as per that, the accountability arrangements. So you may say to a subordinate manager, I will give you authority to do A, B, and C, but not D, E, F. And you'll come back to me for D and F to get authority. But the more senior manager has to decide, and that will cascade down the organisation. Man has to ensure that each manager has the appropriate financial and performance information, giving the input that's necessary to secure improvements in efficiency and effectiveness in the delivery of objectives. It's the more senior manager's responsibility to make sure this financial and performance information is available. A very important feature and problem for many large public organisations is coordination. They need to act in silos without talking to each other, yet many public problems cannot be solved without reference to different parts of the organisation and indeed across organisations. So this word that's used in the 5 elements, communication, becomes very important, much more important than many people realise, bringing together different assets in order to deliver particular objectives. and our responsibility is to ensure that happens. The manager has to decide upon the level of service improvements or efficiency savings that are necessary. The demand from populations for improved services is growing all the time. Better education, better standards of living mean they want better quality public services. But there isn't the money to do better quality public services by just merely raising taxes or other forms of income. So you have to operate more efficiently. So on efficiency should always be a feature of management. Question of identifying and managing risks. Well, this is put first, but in my view, it needs to come quite well down the range of activities that need to be undertaken by the manager, because so many other things precede it. It's important that risks are thought about. And the manager has to monitor the financial and performance activity of subordinate managers. This is part of the accountability process, very important, but must be continued and be a regular part of my activity. Ensure that communication occurs with service users. It's no good to produce something which nobody wants. To produce, even internally, information in form that can't be read or understood or used properly or at the wrong time, that is waste. So it's very important to find out, in order to establish effectiveness, just what is the user wants, and you deliver what the user wants. It's important too for the manager to ensure that internal controls over inputs and outputs. So there will be some controls over inputs. Are they effective or are they not? Are the controls over outputs effective or are they not? And it's important too to think about having a strategic financial plan. It's quite different from a 3-year medium-term budget. A strategic financial plan is usually over a period of 5 to 10 years. It takes into account demographic change, variations in inflation, different environmental circumstances, all sorts of things. And you are to continue with your service into the future, you need to think about whether or not it's financially sustainable. So a strategic financial plan becomes very important. All this depends upon the quality of the staff, the quality of the people working for the manager, and therefore there has to be an effective HR policy. The critical question that we put is, can a single person or a small group, let's say deputy ministers, act as professional managers and define policy, elect the strategy to deliver that policy, set organisational objectives, monitor the achievement of the objectives, and then professionally manage the delivery of the services covering all those points that I have referred to. And we remember that policy and strategy are fundamentally political, operational management is technical. So the consequences of traditional systems are top senior political management are chronically overburdened. They have to deal with simple every operational matters, which means they focus on those or at times don't even do those properly. They don't have proper time for managerial tasks. They don't have any time for thinking, supervision, control, leadership and communication with staff. You're probably very familiar with that. Within a public authority can be familiar with every detail of a particular subject matter. So many decisions taken in this traditional, strictly centralized and hierarchical process suffer from a lack of competence. And the public are satisfied with lack of competence. And staff are involved in the internal decision making. They're authorized as a rule to take the final decision. Their names don't appear. This is demotivating. There's very able people, many of them yourselves, who feel that they've been wasted. They're qualified, well educated, they're not being used effectively. And there's, as a consequence, a lack of accountability of public servants. This is why, in my view, it's important to separate policy and strategy from operational management. But if we go down this route, those who are implementing FMC have to address these sorts of difficulties. I've listed half a dozen here. and you may well be familiar with each of these. How do you actually address them? Because you do have to address them, you cannot ignore them. On the for managers, I did say earlier on that introducing FMC requires changes to the budgeting and accounting systems. Those budgeting accounting systems are designed to meet the needs of the Ministry of Finance. That's perfectly proper, quite appropriate, but they don't necessarily meet the needs of the manager. The manager is to manage properly. Those systems need to change to meet what it is the manager wants. The manager must know the total budget for the area for which he or she is responsible. And in some countries, the manager does not know. He does not know what employee costs are because they're aggregated into a single figure for the organisation. He needs to know how much is allowed to spend on supplies and services, transport costs, property, and so on. But they often don't do that. Property costs will be consolidated. So the manager doesn't know what budget he actually has. And to deliver objectives and performance standards must agree budget and that it's appropriate for meeting those objectives and performance standards. The manager must decide what his employee resources are required. The manager has no say at all in how many staff of what type are required, are to be employed, are employed permanently, temporarily, or whatever. The manager has no role in that. That really doesn't work if the manager is responsible for delivering objectives. The manager must decide what sort of budget analysis is required. So a manager needs flexibility or change budgetary inputs if circumstances change. And very often he can change budgetary inputs because of restrictions imposed by the Ministry of Finance. But if circumstances change during the year, his responsibility as a manager is to achieve the objectives. Therefore, he needs to make changes during the year. The management accounting information, which will be linked to performance, is to identify cost centers. That could be anything that the manager decides. It could be the cost of, say, each police station, the cost of vehicle, the cost of operating theatre, hospital, the cost of different types of medical operations. So cost centres can be almost anything, but they must decide. If the organisation is operating efficiently, therefore he needs cost information, cost management information to enable him to decide whether or not the organisation is operating efficiently. And as I've said, his or her responsibility is to determine the long-run financial viability of the organisation. Development of cost of management accounting is essential. Book is not enough. There has to become the advisor to the manager. So I just summarise, FMC is a radical and advanced management reform. Questions about managerial organisation and a manager's responsibilities. FMC of management accounting becoming professional, and accountability are essential features of effective management. Development should be separated from operational management because one person or a very small group cannot do everything. And control switches to outputs from inputs. And some countries have started to develop program budgeting, which is a very important and good first step up the road of switching to outputs from inputs. Systems needs of the manager as well as the Ministry of Finance. This is helpful to you. Thank you.
Thank you for setting the ground and describing what the requirements for managers under FMC. Now we will right to our colleagues in Croatia, to CEF and Zagrebačka Županija. And once again, if you have any question, please use chat area. You can see it on the right side below participants option. You can open it and simply write question in type area, and then please send it to everyone so that we can see what your question is. I believe that colleagues are prepared. Hear each other?
No.
Hello, Mr. Davor Kozina. So
Yes.
firstly, yes, we will firstly, as presented before, we will firstly listen to Mr. Davor Kozina, Head of Technology and Standard Service at Croatian CHU, present to us how MOF supports the improvement management, specifically in Croatia. So, Davor, yours.
Thank you, Kat. Good afternoon. I would like to thank CEF for inviting me to this webinar and present the Croatian experience in the development of FNC. My presentation is short, concerning the support CHU and Ministry of Finance to improve management. So, as we know, the CHU is responsible for preparing strategies, laws, guidelines, training programs, coordinating with the public sector reform stakeholders, and of course for coordinating with budget users who need to implement FNCC in practice. The law on public internal control system clearly mentions the responsibilities of the head of institution and also responsibilities of other managers. And the role of the finance unit in coordinating the development of this system is also clearly highlighted. Here is our Article 9 in our PIFC law, and you see responsibilities of managers in setting realization of objectives, identifying indicators, risk management, improving business processes, manipulation of achieved results, and also monitoring self-assessment in the internal control system. So we are aware that FNC is not only concern of the Ministry of Finance and the financial units in the public sector. With the development of the budget system, of strategic planning and performance indicator risk management, the role of management in these areas is clearly highlighted. And one key things is to provide the conditions for greater decentralization of responsibility and to transfer of authority and responsibility from heads to other managers. So when we introduced strategic planning, we have obligation to link strategic goals and budgets, and each minister is obliged to make a decision on transfer of authority and responsibility of the goals and for the programs and in the budget. So not only to the top management level, but also to the middle management. And when managers got clear goals and concrete budget, it is crucial because they began to understand what FNC was. So also, regarding the fiscal responsibility statement, 7 years ago, Ministry of Finance introduced the statement of fiscal responsibility, whereby the head of institution confirms the functioning of FNC system. And in practice, you can see that senior and middle management also signs the statement of fiscal responsibility for their part of jurisdiction. So, Civil Foundation Unit also provided risk management guidelines in which the division of strategic and operational risks has been made. Head of management is responsible for strategic risks, and operative managers are responsible for operational risks. Also, CHU has prepared guidelines for managerial accountability, guidelines for cost and managerial accounting for past years. With all these tools available to managers, a training program is being also developed in cooperation with the State Public Administration School. And FNC workshops are intended exclusively for managers. You can see management ability, risk management, performance checks, set planning, regularities, managerial and cost accounting, and also for local levels. So it's also important that perform also quality check of development of internal control system. And regarding that, you can see on this slide 7 points that focus. So let's say adequacy of organization structure in a way that support realization of objective of strategic planning and programs and budget, a manner with which strategic and operation plans are connected, preparing a budget with emphasis on involvement of managers, execution of financial plan and the responsibility of managers in cost and revenue control, assuming commitments and so. Regarding the link FNC system with other reform process, CEF also cooperates with the State Treasury, the Ministry of Administration, with the State Audit Office, with the Ministry of Regional Development, other relevant institutions for the development of this system. So on one hand, to harmonize the development of this system at the level of the in the public, on the other hand, tries to cooperate more closely with financial managers in developing this system. Concerning cooperation with our colleagues in the Zagreb county, we held workshops for managers in the county. We participate in risk management meetings at the level of all counties that are linked to the Croatian County Association. And last year, we also participate in establishing a working group of internal auditors at the level of all counties. We also carry out the quality check of internal audit work. And together with the DG Budget, European Commission, we also performed the FTC system quality check in Zagreb County. When some guidelines are drawn up, from Zagreb County are invited to make their contribution to making the guidelines as much as possible. I would just like to say that FNC is the manager's responsibility, and the development of FNC is a continual process. Due finance units, internal audit units should help managers to take over their responsibilities for the FNC system. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Davor Kozina. It's already a very good introduction for Zagrebačka Županija, Zagreb County, who will now present a practical case how FNC works in practice.
Thank you. My name is Bošnik. I'm head of finance in Zagreb County. And also I would like to refer on Noel's presentation in some interesting hints and in something which I consider relevant. I do agree that FNC is definitely a management reform and should be focused on that way, and we are steady working on that in our country. So definitely it's the truth. The manager's responsibility to achieve efficiency and effectiveness as the most relevant things for the objective we set is still has a lot of place to improve, and we think there is a tremendous potential to do better in next year and the next period, of course. The senior managers must be identified as essential. Yes, it's true, but it's very in the practice hard to say to them it is not just necessary, it is must-have option. So sometimes you mean with made or perfect is not doing so well, but we are trying to force them, push them to do the best they can in that way. Management structure in our country is established below deputy. That means that the head of departments do have necessary rights and accessibility and also authority to make a necessary proposal in order to improve these things. And the responsibility of the different level of management should be, it is in our country. The true objectives should be defined by top and senior management for the managerial level. It's not at the we expect it to be. We'll be continuously promoting, and now in front of us is the next. So we made some new information relevant for top and senior manager in that form to include them more dealing with some relevant information. Achieve objectives should be delegated to relevant level of management. As I already mentioned, it is mostly, and we are really proud of our accomplishment in the last, I would say, 3-4 years, especially. We made huge progress in that sense. So that's for that side, and I think I'll now introduce you to my presentation and public internal financial control in Zagreb County. Some general information about Zagreb County. Zagreb is a real entity. We are so-called Zagreb Ring, well known. We have some 300,000 inhabitants, 9 cities and 25 municipalities. As my side, I'm head of finance in Zagreb County since 2011. Before that, I worked for Volkswagen as a brand manager for some 10 years. So my experience with quality and in that sense, indicators and the results was definitely background in a way something different from this side, but definitely I see this as an advantage in doing this business now. As I said, Zagreb County is better known as Zagreb Ring, and for your information, county, we have 21 counties in Croatia, and is a regional entity based on the historical, social, administrative, economic, or transport relations. Our authority is related to primary and secondary school, health institution, urban planning, traffic and transport infrastructure, maintenance of public roads, building, location permission, of course, planning of development on these institutions. Level of decentralization in Croatia is at the moment around 13% compared to European average from 20%. You see that we can do better. In progress is a new law of the regional government, which brings more autonomy and more decentralization, not just on expenditure but on revenues level too. Zagreb County budget is around 83 million consolidated. At the moment for this year, we have almost 300 projects and activities in our budget, so it is really an impressive number of activities and capital projects. We have 55 budget users and 1 extra budgetary user. And we have also 12 internal organizational units organized as budget users. So they have their own limits. They make planning and they budgeting. So it is definitely a very organization, very structured. And at the end, we have at the moment some 131 processes situated in the map of process, a lot of procedures, instructions, which define above mentioned process and procedures. At the top, we have a strategy normally, which is based for all down mentioned activities. as a head of finance, I'm striving to say when I came here for the first time, I mentioned this, this is good, control is better. But I never stop repeating this to my colleagues, head of departments, while we are now, these days, these years, more focused on output instead of input. And this is definitely a huge step forward. Not to talk more about inputs, that is situated in our organization, but outputs, that means performance indicators and objectives in setting that. There were a lot of potential to do and to do it better. If I see some years ago, I can say that let's watch 2008, when the new Budget Act in 2008 was adopted. We have experienced first self-assessment exercise and administered by Central Harmonization Unit in 2007. We have had annual fiscal statement for the first time. First time budget principles were implemented by new Budget Act, and basic internal financial control was in use at that. So this was a local road from a few from now, and then we can step in 2012. We see that most of PIFC basic building blocks were installed and partially integrated into overall framework. That 2011 was crucial while law of fiscal responsibility was adopted. And this was really a huge step forward. So all the management understood finally that that is important not to work just legally and not to take care about just the legacy, but to work efficiently. So this was really a crucial year and a great step forward. Compliance control were on advanced level as they are now too. We implemented first risk strategy in 2011, and this one will be adopted, and we are preparing a new one for the end of the years. First method of the fiscal responsibility took place in 2012, and separation of duty was most visible on any organizational level in our county. And 17, if I I think about it, this is a great track across. We're doing parallel a lot of things. FT is, I can truly say, is a part of corporate culture. Every manager on subcoordinate level is aware of the importance of developing FMC in their organizational unit. Risk register is in use not just to be put there, but really to watch and to consider the importance of the risks. Some which are maybe for us that, let's say, automation, current capital was on web since 2013, and e-consultation portal was launched for citizens to involve them in participative budgeting in our county. Person responsible for regularity was appointed since 2013. I have started 2 years ago Project Open Budget, which informs on a very public way the citizens and also the representative body members in a timeline which makes it's a kind of let's say something I can compare this to this, while it's a wide range information for those who are interesting and to understand better what county is here for and what is doing to for the citizens. All documents were on web since 2012 too. We have introduced Treasury since 2015 due to recommendations on internal audit, and it really brings a lot of benefits to our users as well. for Zagreb country. All fact acts are online in real time. That is also important to see how transparency is necessary and useful. All polls are also online. E-procurement was implemented in 2014. And also our country was awarded for 3 years, last 3 years, by Institute for Public Finance for Transparency. Line for Citizens also available 2 years ago. And of course, the report annual or semi-annual level are available for everybody. So also write-offs and partial write-offs are also on web, so any party involved and who is interested can see what write-offs at the moment in the country are. I've tried to explain maybe the difference now and 5 years ago, comparing budgetary principle in use in Zagreb country, and I would say the transparency level was really a huge step forward from 1 to 5. That is, I mean, to the maximum. Okay, never say maximum, but it is something about there. Some financial management was essentially also improved. Specification, principle 2, universality, equilibrium, much better. Reality, and budgetary unit of currency. As I mentioned, equilibrium, I will just say we have a risk of underspending. For example, you can have a risk of overspending and underspending. We are facing with underspending risk at the moment in last 3 years, and definitely it could be a problem, let's say, and or take into account into planning. Put some minimum standards. I show you how the in Croatian, in the Zagreb country, use then the control environment, risk management, control activities. That this we have reached an adequate level of controls and of assessment. We see a lot of potential to do in the coming period in information and communication. I mean, firstly, in developing cost and management accounting, so that is will offer better information to manager level, not just for the mayor, but also for our organizational unit head of it. So a minimum we mentioned what is running, and definitely due to in audit it sometimes happens even often. It's normally. We see PIFC, and we do involve this in 100 resources is included. Definitely the whole budget is included in all organizational unit. When we have often very workshops of internal unit to better understanding, I see communication is very important to transfer the ideas, to transfer the motivation to my colleagues to better accept what we are as a financial department preparing for them. And this is the way how we try and how we did it. I mentioned before that I'm proud of some accomplishment we did in the last 5 years. And the risk management in our country, I mentioned we are preparing a new risk strategy for the end of the year. This brings some new things, such as that our companies will be included in risk management, and diversity of accountability is also wanted for managerial level on mayor and mayor. So this is definitely important. Is coming coming 2 months of new risk strategy, and we will stress a new cross risk between the department as important. I often mention to my colleagues that lost opportunity in risk management process is also a risk, and we really are striving to dealing with this in an appropriate way. We think is better. So I can say that half of the risk we do reduce. Some of them we can avert, but most of them normally we do manage. Transfer is not very useful here, but it's normally would be easiest way, but it's not the way it works here. And this is just a kind of question I ask myself: is employee necessary in the risk of register? So we do need dedicated individuals in our system, in our organization. Then we have, as I see of my point of view as a head of finance, I see my colleagues. I try to make them first team player, then competitive employees, and then will become competitive manager, and they can do better or more. Why it is important? Because of the motivation of the individuals or the employees. Comes back to the employees. If he's not motivated to doing progress, or manager or any colleagues to understand what risk management is, the objective is good or not, this is from huge importance. We really strive to stress that the performance indicators and the set objective is the highest level of on importance, and now, as I said, we are preparing for the new budget process. In guideline, we especially stressed this way of thinking on and doing that. What's well, we started just CEF Telecom Call as a partner for e-invoices to implement in the coming year. So this will facilitate our doing and to include all procurement providers and which supplies. Development of course the management accounting. I consider this very important to put more relevant information and to get deeper inside as well, and to reach a better background and the backbone for some new achievements. I stress every time advanced education for employees and workshops, especially in setting objectives and performance indicators. This is the key issue we think for the as well today as for the next period. While we really trying to reduce the wrongdoing and wasteful spending in some to minimize is always normally a part of political decision of the top management level, but we are really trying to educate even everybody involved in this and to reduce those spending on a minimum size. We do have to improve strategic planning process, identifying cross-cutting risk, which will be mentioned in the new risk strategy. As said, sharper focus on measuring results, and also balanced scorecard implementation is in front of us. We encourage our citizens for participative budgeting. Especially for this, I mentioned this performance indicator. If performance indicators are not set well, if they are not measurable, if they are not relevant or specific, then we have a problem. So we can spend money for projects which are running over 10 years without having any specific active, and it can last for next 10 years, and we are trying to avoid this situation. We have procurement, administration, and facilities and finance costs too. Optimizing risk assessment in budgeting is still in progress, and at the end, the digitalization strategy is also in front of us. Will be adopted in the coming month. We think as a potential for boost development and to also some new advantages for our MC in Croatian country. Well, it was for my side, and my colleagues, head of educational department with me, and my colleague Ms. Zvetic from internal audit, but I suggest to focus on questionnaire answers, so we can continue in that way.
Thank you, Ivica, for your presentation, for presenting very impressive developments in your country regarding MC. First, I would like to, before participants think about questions that they have, I would like to just point out what's happening in our chat during presentations, and there was actually a message from Tomislav Micetic from Croatia, who wanted to point out that there was actually new system setting up in it regards with strategic planning, actually new system with Strategic Planning and Management of Development Act. So, copying to this act, he's saying that this act would strengthen FMC implementation. Especially it would affect effectiveness in resources, financial, human, and also it would affect risk management. I would just ask maybe Mr. Davor Kolina from Croatian CHU. Maybe to maybe present the new act, or to point out what is aim of this new act that Tomislav mentioned.
Well, in process is adopted a new law about strategic planning on the national level and also level. And in that law, we try to connect all strategic documents, long term, let's say 10 years, and the middle term, and connect with annual plan and budget. So before that, we didn't explain how it looks like some strategy for 10 years or sectoral strategy. Now we try to connect all documents and define who adopted that. Some documents adopted by parliament, some from government, and how new government can come prepare for year plan for next period, and how they connect with strategic documents, sectoral documents, and also. So I think it will be very crucial to finally all crucial documents for long-term period, and with at the end of the day with the budget, of course. I'd say like cascade structure of all these documents.
Very much we see how much is FMC actually connected to budgeting, strategic planning, and budgeting process. There was also, I would like to maybe continue with questions. There was also a question from Nisret Kocha from Kosovo, CHU FMC, and there were actually two questions. First one was, they are interested to know about new standards for risk management. So risk register, how risks are identified, also assessed. So I believe that Ivica covering this topic. And if you would have any message or any other advice from colleagues from Kosovo, or even Davor Kozina, who I see sitting there. So what is new with respect to standards for risk management?
CEF prepared and the Ministry of Finance adopted new guidelines for risk management regarding to categorize in two groups, crucial risk, strategic risk and operational risk. And before this new guidelines, we have a situation that the highest level of management, some list of risk, maybe 100 risks, but many of them was operational risk. So it's a situation that they are maybe not interesting well in read this risk and take care about this risk. So we to find how occupy the highest level of management and that they think about strategic risk. So if it's I could explain how is in the Zagrebiška Zanti, but it's for this new guidelines get more focus and on management, highest management level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, if I can say further, preparing this diversification between strategic and operational risk, but a special focus is also to involve our companies, not our budget users or internal users, and by setting objectives is especially necessary to identify risk on a better level, that we recognize some risks which may occur, and the follow-up of the risk is also particular importance to develop this follow-up. While we see, as our experience in last 5 years, even if we do have some quarter meetings with we have coordinator for the risks established in every organizational unit. We do approach to the risk of each unit, but we see a much more importance to make a step forward in the follow-up of those risks.
Very much, Ivica. There was a second part of this question, which I see, any of presenters can answer, but maybe I would refer firstly to Davor Kozina, because the question is which is the best practice according to you to monitoring checklist questionnaires from budget organizations? Is it much better to do the monitoring before sending checklists to budget organizations or after results of questionnaires? So in your practice, what would be advice for CHU in Kosovo?
In our practice, it's both sides. It's good. Before it's crucial to get some inputs with the good questions, how they could share everything what we ask from them. But after it's also crucial, let's say, on the quality check. We check, I mentioned before on the slide, what we look at in the institution. So I would say maybe both sides. It's not only one side. CEF could check, let's say, ex ante and ex post what happens in the budget organization. There are 7 points what we have. We perform a quality check on the system of FNC. I think it's very crucial because we'll cover all kinds of main aspects of FNC and how they cooperate with finance units, but we are strongly focused on managers. So how also, like Noel said, managers are crucial part in that development of FMC.
Before moving to next question, I would like to invite another two colleagues from Zagrebačka županija. I believe that they are present in the room. Vjezdana Kvestić and Vjeran Štublin.
Hello, my name is Vjeran Štublin, head of the Zagreb Department of Education, Sport and Culture. And my colleague Vjezdana Kvestić is here.
Internal auditor.
Internal auditor, yes. So maybe Vjeran Štublin, you're head of Education, Culture and Sport department. Could you maybe describe what changes have been done? Ivica so nicely presented just in FMC in recent years. Or what changes have to be introduced or were introduced for you as a manager to know which resources are available to you as a manager? What process?
My colleague Ivica told you about how the Zagreb country is organized, and he mentioned 55 budget users in Zagreb country. That 55 users, 43 budget users is my department. It's the primary and secondary schools. So in past couple of years, we are trying to reduce the risk, and every actions we doing in the strategic way. For example, we are building new schools, we are building sports halls. All of these projects are based on strategy planning in Zagreb county. For example, we have a risk of low budget plan for cost of energy in our schools. That was one of the risks we detect. We try to resolve this risk in two ways. One of the ways that we organize our school to have one supplier for gas, one supplier for electric energy. When we analyze cost of the electric energy before that and cost of the gas before that, we get one nice conclusion that we are saving only for the electric energy 150,000 euros per year and over of 500,000 euros per year on cost of the gas. That is a way to resolve this problem. Another way to resolve this problem is the energetic restore the buildings of the school. We have one example in our school in Jastrebarsko, which we are completely energy restored, and only in that school we have 70% less use of energy than before that process. One example how we manage the risk in the part of the business in Zagreb County. I have one sub-question, yes, that inform you about how we thinking about safety of the children in our schools. Because in Croatia we have the law that all the kids from first to fourth class which are more than 3 kilometers from school have right to free transfer to the school. It was organized by buses, and the buses are usually kids or before of the school. Bus stops are in the front of the schools. That's usually the main street, and there were the risk that children can be hurt when they at the bus. So we in Zagreb country in several schools which were detected as highly risks, put the bus stops inside the schoolyard. So we built a bus stop inside schoolyard to improve safety of the children. That is an example of the risk management and risk reduction. Yes.
Thank you, Vjeran, for presenting those examples, how you manage risks. And may I just additionally ask you how you cooperate or assure that you have all relevant information, resources available as a manager of these processes?
I don't understand. Can you repeat it, please?
Or in your practice in Zagrebačka County, were any changes, any improvements? So for you as a manager, that you know what resources are available in certain business process, in certain projects that you are overlooking.
We in Zagreb County have 12 units, and our budget is strictly determined unit by unit. So I, as a manager of this unit in Zagreb County, have my budget, which I can, and I have pretty open-handed to plan budget as a manager think is the better country. Of course, high managers like perfect and deputy for perfect are that kind of manager that strategically point budget in Zagreb County. And I must say that the perfect and deputy perfect are determined 10 years ago that one of the top priority in Zagreb County is education. That is the top priority. And that is why the budget of the whole Zagreb County, 40% of the budget is transferred in Department of Education. And we, as a Department for Education, we have budget users which then limits for this budget users to inside their budget they can and have some open hand to plan some things, but not full open hand, because we put them some restriction in because we have to ensure that for some purposes have had enough money. For example, we must ensure that there is in every budget user enough money for gas, enough money for electric energy, and some other things.
Thank you, Vera. Before going to the last question, I would invite Mrs. Ivana Kviestic, Head of Internal Audit Unit in Zagreb County, to present her view, how she contributes to strengthen FMC. We connect in connection with management issues or aspects that we were discussing today.
Hello to everybody. I'm head of internal audit. I ispričavam se, ja ću govoriti na hrvatskom jeziku, jer se sjećam sigurno govoriti na engleskom. pa uloga ta neka znači u razvoju sustava financijskog upravljanja FMC-a u Zagrebačkoj županiji sigurno da unutarnja revizija je igrala, nadam se bar, će igrati i dalje jednu ulogu. Ispričavam se, hoćemo odmah prevoditi ili dio podali? Okay, excuse me, please.
I thought that I will
Hello, Daniela.
at the end. Hello to everyone. For the moment, I will just support Zvijezdana in translation.
Thank you very much.
She said in the beginning that she will feel more comfortable if she can talk on Croatian language, so we will support her with translation if this is okay for you.
Thank you very much for jumping in. I'm not so good in Croatian, would be quite difficult for me. I would try, but this is perfect. Thank you for jumping in. And hello also to Daniela. Yes, go ahead.
So, okay, we will just continue. Zvijezdana will present, in fact, the way of work of internal audit and cooperation with manager. Maybe just how, in fact, the internal audit also supports either head of finance unit, but also the manager, like Vjeran is here in the Zagreb County, where, in fact, majority of budget is allocated to education. So, our support.
Hvala. Znači, kao što ste i čuli u ostalom, mi jesmo na određenoj zadovoljavajućoj razini što se tiče razvoja financijskog upravljanja u našoj županiji. Naravno da nismo zadovoljni, nikad nećemo biti zadovoljni dovoljno da ne bi dalje razvijali zapravo sustav.
As you can see, the level of development of financial management and control is on pretty high level here in the Zagreb County, but this is the system that requires continuous improvement, and in that regard, internal audit has still lots of things to do.
Ono što smo mi kao služba unutarnje revizije prepoznali i u suradnji naravno sa Ivicom, koji je znači naciji financijskog upravljanja u županiji nad ostalim odjelima, njegov odjel, jel? I naravno u suradnji sa središnjom harmonizacijskom jedinicom, to je upravo zapravo skreće pažnje fokus na ciljeve rukovoditeljima, i to ne samo znači dužnosnicima koji su jedna politička razina, rekla bi, nego i upravo našim menadžerima, rukovoditeljima upravnih odjela za pojedina područja.
So the Internal Audit Service in the Zagreb County, in cooperation with the head of finance unit and with some also cooperation with the CHU, has noted that it is very important to raise awareness to own management here in the Zagreb County, and this management includes politicians level, but also the level of operational manager, to think about their objectives, to think about their indicators in performing their duties.
Mislim, činjenica je županija institucija, jedna uvjetna tvorevina. I sigurno da kao nekakav prirodni organizam nema taj dio različitih dijelova koji bi utjecali da zajednički tvore jednu skladnu cjelinu. I upravo financijsko upravljanje i menadžment je jedno oružje sa svim svojim znači pogodnostima koje može utjecati na utvrđivanje jasnih ciljeva, jasnih kriterija za korištenje i zapravo tu alokaciju proračunskih sredstava, za realizaciju znači programa koje smo utvrdili za ostvarenje pojedinih ciljeva, za komunikaciju sa korisnicima i za pomoć kao javna uprava, zbog čega smo mi zapravo osnovani.
The county as an institution, in fact, this financial management and control elements could be considered as a tool that support the whole institution, because there could be some separate objectives, but through the FMC system it's possible somehow to let's say to coordinate these objectives and also resources that are available for spending and for allocation. So you understood resources which are limited and objectives that could be very diverse requires some kind of coordination and cooperation between all departments.
Prepoznaći zapravo problematiku Koljerana, Štublina, u njegovom modelu. Zapravo trudili smo se biti neki način suport, podrška kolegi da se prepoznaju potrebe za donošenjem strateške zapravo dokumentacije jedne strategije kapitalnih objekata u školstvu, gdje ćemo mi zapravo utvrditi prioritete, utvrditi kriterije i načine ulaganja, načine financiranja u objekte. Kako bi naravno ostvarili što više zapravo benefita u takvim ulaganjima, jer smo prepoznali zapravo to kao potrebu.
So of the, for example, concrete example of support that internal audit provided to department of Mr. Vjeran has been also in regard of setting a strategic document regarding capital investments in schools in order to set priorities and also the way of how these priorities will be accomplished.
Excuse me, but we are actually, unfortunately, running out of time. If you have any last message to share, I think that this was actually a perfect wrap up. Everything we see is connected, and also your role as internal auditor very much important in supporting other functions, seeing the process, giving reasonable assurance. I don't see colleagues anymore in Croatia. It's difficult to say so.
I have one message to clear. I mentioned that before. Vertrauen ist gut, Kontrolle ist besser. Meine ex-deutsche Kollegen sagen. Nur das.
There was, I believe, also some other messages in the chat area which you can read in the chat. Thank you very much for today. Thank you very much, first of all, to colleagues, to Noel Hapford, to Croatian CHU, and we see also Daniela sitting in Zagreb County, then and colleagues in Zagreb County, and Vietnam, showing us, I think that they all agree that management perspective is very important in FMC, but also that more be done in the future, that also is like a living story, like development. We left with one question, which we will leave for next webinar. So we know that also some of you listened to our first webinar. So this was the second part, and in a near future we will also prepare a third webinar and on FMC beyond Ministry of Finance. So we sincerely hope that you will also join us on a third one. So once again, much appreciate your contribution for today. Thank you very much for joining us, again, all the speakers, all participants, and I wish you a very nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
I see.